Cosmic True Slasher Review.
You can answer the dreams of Friday the 13th fans around the world, because I guarantee you that everybody who's made a Friday the 13th fan film has found their fandom within the franchise. It's a pizza with 12 different slices. It's 12 different movies that sort of all have 12 different things to say and do. Maybe 3 and 4 are probably the most similar to each other, but there's all these offshoot stories that people could tell. So to see people just now being like, well, I'm going to tell my story now, and to see these different things, it's been a lot of fun, because it feels like in the wake of the franchise letting us down in its own right by not creating movies and getting stuck in the lawsuits and doing all that stuff, fans have just been entertaining themselves, and it's been hilarious and entertaining to watch.
I was going to mention that there was that lawsuit that's kept new stuff from really being made and everything. And I feel like your movies really stepped in and helped fill that gap, as you mentioned the other fan films as well. But
right.
When this thing started to gain steam, did you get contacted by anybody, Sean Cunningham or Horror Inc. or any of those people to kind of sniff around and see what the hell was going on?
No one ever really got involved. I met Sean a couple of times. Alumni reached out to me. Like Doug Tate was one of the first people to reach out and say, I think you did a great job. Tom McLaughlin wrote me a nice message and said, I love what you're doing. Really inspired. Thanks for keeping the Tommy story alive.
Was that just the coolest thing ever? Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah.
Tell us about that feeling. Like, that just has to be so validating.
All right, let me, I'll rewind it just a little bit. I'll get to that. That will be a tent pole of this story, but it rewinds to the night Telluride that it came out. Now, Tom Matthews is in the movie. We didn't tell anybody what Tom Matthews is in the movie. And, that night was special because a lot of people didn't know what Never Hike Alone was going to be. We got enough buzz that people were tuning in, like Bloody Disgusting had posted about it. So we at least had a few hundred people that were going to tune in. And I remember sort of not knowing how people were going to take it. And I went through the whole screening. I did the Q&A. It was sort of all a blur because it was just like, thank God the movie played. We literally handed in like the movie like the day before, being like, here it is, it's done finally. Like we flew with it. We hand delivered you the movie, plug it into the system, let's do it. And the film played, and I didn't know how it hit. And then I sat down, like everything ended. I walked back to the hotel room. I flipped open my laptop and I started seeing the reviews, and I was just floored. I mean, people were commenting on the movie. It was mostly positive. I mean, it was all positive for the most part. And people were, the reviews were insane. And so it was just like this. It wasn't just the fact that, the film had sort of been well reviewed. It was that we had worked so hard. We went through so many ups and downs, some low lows. We thought at moments that the movie wasn't going to get made. And for a while, we didn't know if it was going to be any good. In the editing room, we were like piecing the thing together, and it was, at one point it was just a mess. And I was like, did I make a mistake? And then, to come out the other side and have people like not only like it, but it's like, it's the thing you dream about. You know what I mean? Like you joke about it at the beginning of the project, like, hey, imagine if we make it and it goes viral. And then, you just expect that like, well, you got to be realistic. Things just, people don't really love fan films, whatever. And then all of a sudden it starts going viral, and you just sort of it becomes this one wave. And so all of a sudden it was like, Doug writes me, and I'm like, that's cool. I bump into Derek Mears at a convention, and I hand him a flyer saying, hey man, I've been working on this thing called Never Hike Alone. And he goes, yeah, I saw the trailer for that. That looks awesome. Good luck. And then all of a sudden you get a message from Tom McLaughlin, who's my hero. You know what I mean? And so it was just, it sort of was this thing that just kept happening, where it was like it was this constant wave of like opening up all these doors. It was like I unlocked a new level of Friday the 13th fandom, where they were letting me behind the scenes like it was Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. And I was getting to see how everything was made, and getting to sit down. Like I got to have dinner with Joe Zito and ask him questions about Friday the 13th, where I learned that Joe considers Jason an undead killer in that movie. He says, yeah, at the beginning of the movie, he's dead and he comes back to life because that's what Jason does. And I was just like, wait, what? I was like, have you ever said this in public? And he was like, I don't know, probably. Like, well, and it just kind of went on. eventually meeting Deb Voorhees, getting involved with the 13 Fanboy Project, and then ending up on a movie where I get to fight CJ Graham and Kane Hodder. I Superman punched CJ Graham in the face. Like it's like, and it's funny because it's just, I'm doing these things and they're, sometimes they're jobs and sometimes they're these things, or I'm getting to go to conventions and talk to people, but like I'm a fan. And so it's just this really cool sort of, it's tough to explain. And I honestly, like I'd say this to a lot of people, like it's tough to see the forest through the trees sometimes, because when it keeps happening, you sort of just kind of settle into it. And now, like I got into a habit where Tom and I were going to, every 6 weeks we'd go and grab coffee in Hollywood and talk about what we were working on. And like, he has the music with the sloths and he was teaching at the local, at a college that was nearby. He had some projects that he was working on that he was trying to get off the ground. And, we talk about Friday the 13th and the future of it. And, going back to something you said a little bit before, like it wasn't just the lawsuit. It was the fact that the studios literally couldn't figure out what they wanted to do. They couldn't figure out a sequel to 2009. They canned that. They had David Bruckner do a found footage that they canned. Then they had him come back to do a 3D version that they canned. And they brought Brett Eisner on to write this like really weird, movie that almost got made. They were literally painting the cabins in Georgia when they shut it down after Rings 2 bombed. And they went, we're not going to do Friday the 13th for $20 million if, Jason Blum's out there making $5 million movies and getting, $150 million back. Right. Like we're just spending money wrong. So we're not going to make any more Friday the 13th. So in 2017, Never Hike Alone came along at a time where it caught Friday the 13th fans when they were at a low moment. Like the game had come out and that was fun and we were all enjoying that, but like people really wanted a movie. And, with them canceling the movie, it opened up this door for us because there was a need for Friday the 13th. No one was answering that need. The fan films that had come out before it had sort of suffered from not having access to the equipment, or maybe just not, having that sort of skill set to tell, such complete stories or know how to create scope and scale in the way that we were doing it. And there was just something new, and it felt like it could sort of settle in for what we weren't getting from the studios. And I think that, hopefully, and they still feel this way, but like Horror Inc. and anyone who was involved with the franchise never got mad at us, never sent us a cease and desist, never gave us any inkling that they were going to sue us. I met Sean a couple of times and he always acted like he never knew what Never Hike Alone was. And if he doesn't, that just means he doesn't pay attention. You know what I mean? And I'm like, good, keep looking the other way. Like, right. Deal with other things. I don't mind. You know what I mean? I
feel like either thing could be true. He knew exactly what it was and was just acting that way, or he just has no idea. Everything I've ever heard about him, he seems pretty aloof.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know how to read it, but he was always really nice to me. And, I got to meet Victor Miller. I actually asked Victor Miller in a Q&A. I said, would you ever, if you gain the rights to Friday the 13th through this lawsuit, do you have any intention of pursuing, cease and desist against the fan films? He goes, no, why would I? It's like free marketing. They're just out there having fun, as long as nobody's making a ton of money. And I think that, even as we started to raise more and more money, obviously we've had people be like, well, how are you not getting sued? Like, what do you mean? Why does it cost that much money? I think people who were in the film business, who knew what I was doing, they're like, how are you doing that with so little money? Everyone looks at the looks at the crowd and goes, $350,000. Holy shit, I've never seen $350,000 in my life. Now it's like, this guy just got one to make a fan film. And in my head, like I had come from the school of like, I was working on $70 million animated films. And so I've worked with giant budgets and worked with giant teams. And it's like, how do you replicate these giant ideas on a small scale with the team that we have and actually have it meet the potential of those things? So it was, especially shooting in California with getting the locations and the permits and dealing with SAG and doing all that stuff. It's like, people don't realize that like a lot of the film's costs get eaten up on things that like, unfortunately don't like in any other way, like really end up on screen, which like, I want to spend it all on people and stuff. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to spend it on insurance and like pension, like all these other things that just sort of don't make for a better movie, but it's the things you have to pay for in order to have permission to shoot movies. And we could no longer just escape into the forest with 3 people anymore. We were expanding the stories into like multiple actors and dealing with unions and all that stuff. So we had to start doing things by the book. And, we're just lucky that fans showed up in the way that they did. And that it was nice that we got allowed to just celebrate this with fans, and we built this fan base, these people that kept coming back. I recognize names, like when I would do the crowd funds, I recognize names from previous crowd funds. There's people that I've met traveling the country who, you know, walk up to me and are like, your film changed my life. When Tom Matthews opened those doors, I wept like a little baby. It's like awesome. Like that's exactly what I want to hear. I just wanted to give Friday the 13th fans a reason to cheer again. Like it's been so long, and that was really the mission of it. And that's been the mission of it. It's to sort of fill all these gaps. Was a fan of like, what is the real ending of Friday the 13th? Because I do not accept Jason Goes to Hell. Like, give me something that actually sort of like leads to something that feels like it's born out of this story. And that's where the story of Never Hike Alone 2 really came from. And that was, you know, Never Hike in the Snow became an extension of it, so we could get Jason in the snow. And it allowed us to explore all these themes that were always there in Friday the 13th, but they were just left behind, flailing on the wind, and never carried on, and never talked about or ever discussed or really, you know, utilized. I felt that Friday the 13th was leaving a lot on the table, and that if they actually used the assets that they were creating, that in turn they could tell a better story. And that's really, you know, how it ended up, you know, turning out that way.